What is happening out there, Roto Scouts basketball fans? Knew I should have scheduled this one for 4:45. Sorry we're a couple minutes late getting started there. I think I also just woke Joker up when I started the show. He just scrambled out from under the desk. Sorry, buddy. Poor dog. I think he was sound asleep down there. Welcome. Tuesday show. Early-ish kind of a start. Could have actually knocked this one out earlier, but there were 11 hockey games to get through after I put the projections up. But got an early jump on things given the short slate and not a ridiculous day of everybody on back-to-backs, no injury reports, 37 teams with nobody, half the league out. Not that kind of day today, so we were able to get ahead of the curve a little bit. Should be a good one to talk through. Just 4 games on the slate. Not too many dominoes as far as known unknowns. We've got a pretty decent picture of what things look like right now, but we do have a few things to keep our mind on. But after last night, which easily the most chaotic hour of the season from the 7 to 8 o'clock window yesterday, right around a half hour before the 7:30 lock, the entire shape of that slate changed. We had Trey rolled out, Keaton Wallace stepped in. We had 37 different things changed in that first hour with those, 5 games started at 7:30? Or 4 games? Brutal mess of a slate. I feel like we were mostly on top of things, but it just, for me, lineups just didn't click. Had a lot of good scores, no great scores. I think it was kind of impacted by what we were seeing in the sim results, where we were just getting flat on a lot of the star caliber players. And we saw Nikola Jokic go off for a pretty top-end score. Forget who the other top-end scorers were, but had pieces and parts in a lot of lineups, but just didn't have that one where they all kind of meshed together. But only played a shorthanded set of lineups yesterday. Did not like that slate and knew it was going to be chaos going in. Anyway, as we get started here, do me a favor, hit the like button, the handful of people who are here. Hopefully we get a good little turnout today. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, a little bit ahead of some of the other shows out there in the industry. So hopefully we got a little window of time and not too much to talk about. So we'll keep it light-ish, for us, maybe an hour or so. We'll see how we do. But let me pull up the old Vegas board here. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. I imagine the few of you who are here so far are probably already subscribed. But if you're new, welcome. Hit the subscribe button. Helps me out a little bit. Still trying to get to 1,000. Love to hit that for the beginning of baseball season, which is right around the corner at this point. Speaking of top 600 top 600 rankings for season-long Roto baseball are up on the website right now for members, as is a off-season recap piece. I'm going to be doing an update to the rankings. I'll get the first global update in. It will. I said this yesterday and did not get to it yesterday with all that chaos. But with things being very calm tonight and an 8 p.m. last lock, it should be very easy for me to jump over and get an update in on those rankings. And we do need to clean some things up, like Garrett Cole, going to be out for the season with Tommy John. Grayson Rodriguez, a couple other pieces. They're noted in there. But then there's other things that I just want to move some guys up, move some guys down. So definitely going to be on top of that, and I'll keep on top of it over the next couple of days and through the next couple of weeks too, till opening day. We do have the Tokyo series coming up very, very soon. I believe it's the 17th, 18th. So like the end of next week. But that's just 2 games. And then there's another week or 10 days, something along those lines, till actual opening day. So there's more room there for some season-long drafts, and people will be hitting that. So I'll be on top of all that during the season. In addition to daily, every single day for MLB DFS, we're definitely going to be running a weekly waiver wire column. I'll try and do a top 2 starters pitchers column as well for streamers. That might just be part of the same waiver wire piece. We'll see how it all comes together. But I'm going to continue doing season-long content through the season because it's, an article here, article there type of a thing, easy enough. And all of that for under $1 a day. Plus NBA DFS till the end of the season. NHL DFS to the end of the season. Through the playoffs for those two, I would imagine as well. And then MLB DFS all season and into NFL. We're not that far away from NFL draft season, NFL mini camps over the summer, and everything always sneak up. And then before we know it, we're halfway through baseball season, but all of a sudden it's preseason NFL again, and we're starting that back up. So just a nonstop clock. Get in on a plan while you can. Everything under $1 a day, weekly, monthly, quarterly. That is enough selling. I've been rambling. Brooklyn at Cleveland. Top of the Vegas board here. First game up. 17-point spread. Favoring Cleveland, obviously. Brooklyn, a couple pieces back with the ins and outs that they, every other game guys are skipping. But we're on a plus side today as far as availability. So maybe some pieces coming out of that one, but kind of a grindy game against Cleveland. On the Cleveland side of that, we'll get the top end. Anybody from the top end of Cleveland is always going to be playable, especially against a lousy team like the Nets. But it's not the best overall game. 227-point total. It's fine, but it's not super appealing. That said, Cleveland 122 is the second highest overall implied total on the slate, given how highly favored they are. So a lot to work with there. But given that everybody in that starting five typically plays 29 to 32, 28 to 32, rather than 31 to 36, it does cut into their the way that they hit ceilings as far as projections, as far as the numbers go. But we'll see where they come up. Washington at Detroit, another ugly one, a 15-point spread in this one. That one's in the Pistons' favor at home. 235-point total is the second highest on our four-game slate. The Detroit Pistons at 125 are our highest implied total of the day, which is weird to say. I gotta admit, that is a weird statement, but 125, massive total. Obviously, it's largely created by going up against the incredibly inept Washington Wizards. They are supposed to be getting Jordan Poole back. Is he questionable or is he back? I forget. Yeah, Poole not on the injury report. So he should be there. That's somewhat impactful for the Washington side. Big total in that one. We'll be chasing pieces and parts all over that one, I'm sure. Pacing game between the Bucks and the Pacers. Didn't mean to do that, but there it is. 236.5-point total is the highest of the day. It's also the game with two very competitive implied totals. 119.5 for the Bucks. They're favored by 2.5 on the road. 117 for the Pacers. And then winding things out, the Clips and the Pellies. A 7-point spread in the Clippers' favor. 222-point total. We are getting a ton of the Clippers stars up at the top of the board there, as you can see on both sites. They're the three most highly owned projected players on the FanDuel slate. They're among the three most highly owned or five most highly owned on the DraftKings board. They're just good chalk going up against the lousy Pelicans, and as relatively heavy favorites, 114.5-point total, and they're more affordable than some of the other stars on the slate. So a lot to work with there. As far as the ins and the outs go, Kenny Woodhouse, what's going on, buddy? Anthony Taylor, Cujo, good to see everybody. Welcome. Hope your weeks are going well. Hope your Monday went well. Hope your Tuesday. Hope your DFS results were better than mine last night. I'm always hoping that for you guys, though. I mean, I always want to be in first place, but if I'm in second, one of you guys is in first, I can tolerate that. But hopefully things are going well. Hopefully your Tuesday's going well. Not working too hard. If you work for the government, hopefully you got your bullet points taken care of for the week already. You can just kind of coast the rest of the way. Anyway, probables, Giannis, Dame, both probable. Ray J. Dennis, still probable out of the G League for the Pacers. So is Quentin Jackson. Enrique Freeman is doubtful today. The last few games, they've had all three of them listed as probable. So we're down to just Ray J. and Quentin Jackson. Jose Alvarado is available. Questionables, DeAndre Hunter, Donovan Mitchell, Pat Connaughton, Pete Nance, Tyrese Halliburton, TJ McConnell, Drew Eubanks. So Hunter, Mitchell, obviously very key names for the Cavs. And then Hallie and McConnell are the other two key names. The other guys on that, mostly irrelevant. Outs, Toshan is in the G League. D'Anthony Melton, D'Angelo Russell are both out. Derek Whitehead is out. Ty Jerome is out. Sadiq Bey, Malcolm Brogdon, Bilal Coulibaly, A.J. Johnson, Jaden Ivey, Chris Livingston, Bobby Portis, Tyler Smith, Enrique Freeman is doubtful as mentioned. Norm Powell's out. Ben Simmons, Brandon Boston Jr., Herb Jones, DeJounte Murray, and Kelly Olynyk are all out. Short list today, though. Only 4 games. Like I said, relatively sane slate compared to what we've been working with lately. My God. So, given that, this will be a day where the roof starts leaking in one of these games. The power goes out in another one, and 3 guys hurt themselves in the first quarter and come out of their games, and we'll just get total pandemonium again because we just can't have nice things on NBA slates. But keeps us on our toes. Yanks shuffling some players around in spring training. Ederson Pereira to AAA, and Spencer Jones goes to the minor league camp. Expected. So, let's dive into this one without further ado. Handful of folks here. Spread the word. Tell people. Tell your friends. Tell people in your other Discords. I know you guys are all out there and, these other sites where we've been, where we go sometimes. So every now and again, somebody in there is like, hey, whatever happened to that Terry guy who used to be around? Hey, just mention, hey, you know what? He's out there. You can find him. Point them the right way. You don't have to go advertising, but little road signs here and there does help. So do the likes, so do the subscriptions, guys. So appreciate all of those. And anybody who subscribes at the website for, again, under $1 a day for access to everything that goes up on that site. Really very much appreciated, every single one of you. Let's get into things here. Cut by guards. Same slate on both sites as far as the availability of games. Breaks down a little bit differently, but not dramatically so. You can see a big outlier there with Marcus Smart at 4,100 on FanDuel. We're getting a ton of Marcus Smart randomly. 32.6%. That's a 20-minute projection. The 0.93 per minute player. I was not necessarily expecting to see that. He's very cheap. I got him right on the nose for that kind of production. Maybe a little, 0.94 on DraftKings. I've got him right where he's been playing. Wasn't expecting that one to pop so much. I mean, you can see it's 0.45 shy of our value threshold of 5. It's only an 18-point projection. That's probably just a product of a very short slate and some positional. Just he's cheap enough to go through those positions at that projection with a little bit of bounce to him. Not a lot of love for him on DraftKings at all. 6%. Shooting guard, small forward over there for only 100 more. You can see the difference in how he works site to site. The value score is a lot lower on DK too, where we need the higher 5.5. But that's the interesting outlier. Everything else is relatively close for a lot of these guys. Even the 40 here versus the 27 over there. Close enough. There's a 14 and a 19 down here for more outliers, but we're below the field and happy to be there on Timmy Hardaway. Level with the field on Taurean Prince. So a couple of really, really, really low-end per-minute performers there. I don't mind having those positions and being pretty well below the field or level with the field at relatively low ownership on both Timmy and Taurean Prince. And honestly, if I could take a little less, get that down to 15, get that down to 10, I think I would. Don't really chase those guys all that much. Every now and then you can catch with Timmy. Taurean Prince is a little bit more difficult. But anyway, going up to the top of the board, actually talking about the good players on the slate. It's an uncomfortable amount of Dennis Schroeder. I know I said talking about the good players and I went to a medium kind of a player. But he is popping for value. 4,400 at both guard spots on DraftKings has him in half of our lineups between point guard and shooting guard. On FanDuel, same double guard positioning. I've only got him at a 24-minute projection. He's 4,800. He's short of the value threshold on FanDuel, but so is everybody not named James Harden among guards. And then James Harden is way above the FanDuel value threshold. So go figure. That's why we're getting 73% of James Harden on FanDuel. That's why he's the most highly owned in projections on FanDuel. But a lot of Schroeder, 45%, well above the field, even though he's short of that value mark. I think it's another one that's just kind of pushing through on position. You're getting him at 48 going through probably the point guard. Because looking down the board at point, there's not a comparable price until you get to that Marcus Smart share. So that's almost certainly why that's coming up. It just works price-wise at point guard. I bet you most of those shares would be at point guard, not shooting guard. Because you've got a few. You've got shooting guard, small forward there on Max Strus. You've got $4,700 small forward there. That doesn't really count for this argument, but he could fill some of those Strus ones, and then Strus can go into the shooting guard. Same deal with $3,800 there. Getting, maybe some of them fall in shooting guard, but I would bet the majority of those go through the point. On both sites, James Harden looking like a top-end priority today, though. 1.26 per minute, 1.31 per minute across sites, 29 and change % usage. Norm Powell still out for them, so pushes a little value up the board for Harden, pushes a little bit of value up the board for Kawhi, for Zubac, who we'll talk about in just a minute. All three of those guys dominating the top of the board. Again, if you missed it at the beginning, just to put it back in perspective, we have 58% Harden. We have 48% of Kawhi for only 8,100. And then we have nearly 40% of Zubac for 8,000. All three of those guys are going to be in lineups. That's perfectly fine, especially on a 4-gamer. Do not sweat it. On FanDuel, we have even more of those guys. 73% Harden, 66% Kawhi, and 72% Zubac because they're even relatively cheaper. So, really good-looking spot as far as the Clippers go, and we're going to be getting to tons and tons of them. Gets real flat in a hurry here, though. 30%. It jumps from half of all lineups down to 30% and quickly into the 20s. But we do have a pretty even distribution with some commonality of price across those guys on DK. And you could throw $4,400 Dennis Schroeder into that mix. So on DraftKings, there's more bounce between the positions. Having Jose Alvarado, for example, he's 57 on FanDuel. He's 46 on DraftKings. That's a really, really strong value play on DraftKings where he's really not landing on FanDuel, and it also gives you something to swap back and forth with those Schroeder shares. Same thing with $4,700 Chris Dunn. He's 5,000 on DraftKings. On FanDuel, we're getting a lot of them, but it's not as swappable. So I think there's more room to maneuver between, say, all these shares on DraftKings. You do have one outlier there at 71 for Darius Garland, 27% of him. 62 for Cam Thomas, I guess, is somewhat comparable. Cam's also got that point guard small forward eligibility, which is unique. So you can flex back and forth between those two guys, but you can also look at it as a situation where move around some of the shares among the multiple value guys in the fours, the 3, 4, 5 value guys that we have in that range in the fours. Maybe build 3+ positions and 2- positions, and then try and dump additional shares into Darius Garland. I don't fully trust the Cam Thomas spot. For one, going up against Cleveland on the other side of the Garland position, I'd just rather take the better player on the better side of that game, going up against a bad team versus going up against a very, very good team. But if that price difference means anything, then yeah, you can get to some Cam Thomas there. There's also a little bit of a minutes favoring Garland. But Thomas could easily go out there and play 30. There's definitely a lot of back and forth right here. Alvarado, since he's fully available, fire away, 4,600. Fully expecting him to play 26+ minutes. I might have him on the low end of that range. He played nearly 32 in their last game, put up 33.5 FanDuel points, right around his point per minute expectation. Love the spot at 4,600 on DraftKings. I wish he was cheaper on FanDuel. 57 just not workable. That's around the right price for a 0.99 per minute guy. So really not popping on the FanDuel slate. Does look like we're getting a fair amount of Zion. Okay, good. I looked too quickly, and I thought that was Zion. It's Zaire Williams. Value play. 4,700 small forward only on the FanDuel slate. Shooting guard small forward. That's why he's on the board here on DraftKings for 44. We got 24% of him on the DraftKings slate. He's in that same group. On FanDuel at 21% and above the field for 4,700. Not a bad option, but again, I just don't love the Brooklyn side of that game. I really don't want to throw a terrible Nets team too much at the Cleveland side, but the value's working, and on a short slate, we're just going to get some of those guys because of the way that the price drives them through those positions. Max Strus, there's a few minutes to play for some of the downstream Cleveland guys. Sam Merrill's a few spots further down the board, but fewer shares. But there's a couple extra minutes for those guys. Strus at 14%, but only a 4.31 value score on FanDuel for 47, shooting guard small forward, and then you swing across the DraftKings. We got him at 29% over there because he's 4,100. It's a 4,100. Emphasize the wrong word. It's a much, much stronger value play. It's still short of the 5.5 that we want, but nobody reached 5.5 among guards on DraftKings today. Best we've got is 5.41. So we'll take what we get, and again, he's a big part of that group of 1 and 4 types right here. Cade, one of the stars on the slate. You can absolutely take his top 4 or 5, or probably top 3 overall projections. Let's see. Just in the raw projection sense, he is third. One of only 3 guys projected over 52. One of only 3 guys projected over, for that matter, 45. There's a jump. There's a big step. Dame, Zion, Kawhi, Zubac, Hallie, if he plays. Donovan Mitchell, all projected between 40 and 45. And then from there, there's a jump to, that's on DK scoring. There's a jump from 45 to 52 for Cade. Arguably a little bit high. I gave Cade quite a bit here for the matchup. You could knock him down by a point and a half if you want to. But he'd still be, offset by 5+ points over the field. And that group of guys in the 50s is Giannis at the top, then Harden, then Cade. Any one of those three guys, any two of those three guys, if you can get them into the same lineup, fire away. That's what the value guys are here for. So while we got Cade 18% and below the field, his raw point scoring on a 4-game slate is super appealing. His value score is not bad, 5.13 at 10,200. That's not bad. You can see 5.03 for $9,000 Dame, a spot down, and we got less of Dame. Cade is the better, technically, value buy. On FanDuel, that's slightly different. 4.81 versus 4.82. They're right next to each other because Dame's only 89 and Cade is 10.5 over there. 21% of Dame, 14% of Cade. Below the field on both, but fairly significant shares, and that's true over here as well. But we're furthest from the field on Cade at 10-2 on DraftKings. I do think you could claw your way back to the field, but probably wouldn't do it. I would maybe try and establish like that kind of, get a little bit, but not all the way back to the field if you want more. But all the Cade you can carry perfectly fine. Keon, another net that I'm just not too excited about. We're getting odds and ends of all these guys. The nets are spot fillers. That's really what it comes down to. Right? 21% here, 24%, 28, 28. And then, where'd he go? Complete loss. Keon, 13, 9. We're going to get them just because of a dearth of options overall. But it's not great. Keon, 0.86. Solid 20+% usage guy. He's fine. I'd just rather get him at these prices against worse teams. On DraftKings for just 47, I think he's just getting boxed out by all these shares. Right? He's not that far off from any of those plays. 47 here for, who's that? Chris Dunn. 5.20 value score versus 47 here for literally 1.45 raw projection lower, 4.9 versus 5.20 value score. Those are directly interchangeable parts. There is really, really no difference between that and that other than where we're at versus the field. So if you want to come down on the Chris Dunn play, you can easily go here and just bring this up a little bit. And if you end up with the field 12-15%, so be it. That's fine. Keon's good enough for that. But directionally right now, Sims wants us a little bit starkly below on the Keon play over here. Closer to the field and a little bit more in our pocket on FanDuel, unfortunately. But the value just functions differently. Shooting guard, small forward on FanDuel, he doesn't get pushed away by the values like we have over here. Disappointed in our shares of Trey Murphy. Just 2% on FanDuel, level with the field for 82. 77 is a great price for him on DraftKings. Shooting guard, small forward eligible. That said, it does only yield a 4.75 value. Where are we at on this projection? I could give him either, or I might not do it, but one could. You could either give him another minute or just like a little bit more of a rate nudge. I do have him knocked down slightly in the matchup against the Clips, but only slightly, and there's so much favoring him in this matchup, or just in general. I've got him at 36 minutes. Come on. That's a step down from, 37 last game, 31, 39. You could reasonably give him a 37th minute and take care of that situation. It would just result in getting slightly more. But I'm interested in him more than this might indicate. and more than that might indicate. Just a good option from the upper mid-range. Fair piece, fair spot filler too if you're building a lineup where, I can't quite get to my 8,000 something or 9,000 something somebody else. He's a reasonable alternative to the top shelf items. He's like that best scotch option on the middle shelf. Can't get the Macallan 50. You jump down. Well, technically, you just grab like the 25. Or what is it, 18? Macallan's really good. You guys like scotch? I haven't had scotch in a long time, but yeah. We had one, I think it was 50. Whatever the oldest one was in the bar that was around the corner from our office. I made a gigantic sale of our technology services, identity management services, back when I worked at the IT firm in the city. And we went out to celebrate. And like at the end of the night, we were all hammered. It was the worst time to do that shot. But I remember just how good it was. And my boss was like, I got the 50 down, bring it down here. And they're like $175 a shot or something absurd like that. It's not that much, I don't think, but something absurd. And just really, really good. But you want that at like the beginning or like with a nice steak or something, when you can appreciate it. At that point, it was like, oh, that was delicious. What's up, Doug? Good to see you, buddy. Just meandering our way through the slate here, pal. What are you looking at today, Doug? Good to see you. Welcome to everybody else out there. Handful of folks here watching. Doug likes the bourbons and the ryes. Okay, I like it. I tried recently, I might have mentioned it at one point, was my buddy Charlie brought it. It was red wine that was aged in bourbon barrels. Really good stuff. It puts this it creates like this really like smooth, I want to use the word velvety, but it sounds kind of jerky. But it really is. And it takes like the bite out of both sides of it. Really, really good and unique flavor. Gives it like a kind of honey back end on the red wine. Really interesting. Really enjoyed it. So yeah, I think you could reasonably give Murph another minute or so there. And then looking down the board the rest of the way, we talked about the outlier Marcus Smart shares. Again, I think those are just coming through based on the cheap pricing. Cheap prices versus positioning for a couple of unique guys on FanDuel makes them look better than the actual projections, the actual value scores are, just because it's just driven that way. Think of them as just functional, right? They are just the thing that you wedge under the table to stop the table from shaking. That's all they are. They're the step stool to reach the things up in the top shelf. Aging bourbon in port barrels. There you go. Yeah, when I was at that company that I was talking about, my buddy Elliot was probably, I guess he then was the age I am now, like mid-40s, but had been like business guy in the city, all expense account dinners and everything. So like he had the town wired. He had a lot of stuff like that. Just cold as far as like, this isn't what you want. This is what you want. It was good for that kind of a thing. Learned a lot of that stuff from him. Valuable, not valuable, I don't know. Picked up a lot of that stuff. Was never a suit guy, though. Were you guys suit guys? Or are you guys suit guys? Those of you who have office jobs? We had to wear suits. And keep in mind, I was selling IT services. So it was literally most of the time meeting with a guy in like jeans and a t-shirt in the IT department. And I'm there in like, granted, most of the time, cheap suit. Rack suit from JCPenney or something. But at one point, my boss Todd, who was like this super like 80s over the top, don't take this out of context, 1980s Donald Trump type guy. Not the current guy, not getting political. I'm talking about like just straight out of that that 1980s New York City Wall Street crowd, right, was very much that, and was a super over-the-top suit guy. Took me out one time. He was like, "Hey, we're going to get you decked out. You're going to look good. You're going to start crushing it, making so many sales." And he made me spend like $1,200 on like 2 suits and like a jacket. Like, for one thing, they fell apart in like a year. It's just like threadbare within a year. I was like, this is what I spent all that. The worst. The worst. And just so like, you walk in the door and they're like, well, your services are obviously going to be too expensive for us. Salespeople suck. I agree. Actually, they're kind of fun. Depends on the context. If you're getting sold to, they can be fun as long as you're in control of it and you're kind of just letting them take you out to stuff and everything. It can be fun to be that person. The most fun thing is to tag along on those things when it's just like, hey man, I need somebody to like a wingman kind of a deal, right? It's not your sale. You don't really care. You're just there on the expense account having fun. That's the way to do it. Money Crockett knows what I'm talking about. Birdner loves suits, never for work, was a mechanic for 10 years, now in a retail store, pretty casual attire my whole life. Yeah, I tell you what, for not working or like not mandatory, I could get into a suit. Like, it's never something I do, but like if I have to, or I just said not mandatory, but like if it was my choice, like, hey, you could do business casual for this, or like, some of us are doing like suits, nice suits, then I could be like, all right, that's kind of cool. I could get into that a little bit. So I'm with you there. But like, yeah, the mandatory or just like the inappropriate mandatory suit. I get it if like I'm pitching, Warren Buffett something. I should probably go in wearing a suit. But I'm literally like pitching an IT director from a public school who is there in a Megadeth t-shirt and ripped jeans. It's like, this guy does not want to talk to somebody in a suit. It's just weird. Money Crockett wears a suit all the time in finance. Everyone else wears jeans now. Is that like a product? Is that your choice, or is that like a product of company culture coming down and making you? That's it again. If it's your choice, especially if it makes you stand out in the field, and like it's like, hey, who's that nice dressed guy over there? And like everybody else is like looking like a schlub. Then yeah, again, I get it. You got an angle to it and everything. Anyway. Salespeople always testing their strategies on someone. You have to hope you're not the one. It always kind of came naturally to me. I don't know, like poker and DFS. I never went to a sales seminar. I never learned closing techniques or anything. I don't know. I just talk to people. I just tell them like I do on these shows, right? I just tell the truth and be earnest about things, and tends to come across. Hey, that was actually what ended up killing me in that job. Not to get too far down this rabbit hole, but once they started being terrible at what they did on the implementation side, lost all our clients, it was very difficult for me to be like, yeah, we're the best at what we do, while I was losing every client I had. So that was around when we parted ways. There you go. Money Crockett says it's my choice now because the culture reversed from the 80s to casual. Yeah, I get that. Like I said, I totally get that. Looking at the top of the board among centers on DraftKings, Jalen Duren standing out on DK because he's only 6,600 over there, speaking of good investments. 5.72 value score, one of the few guys above a 5.5. And I think is that our highest raw value score of the day on DraftKings? I think it is. Yeah. Yep, 5.72. We've got 3 guys on the entire slate above the value threshold on DK, and they're all on that in that cut. It's Jalen Duren. It's Carlo Makovic, who you could say those minutes may be a little bit shaky. Oh, actually, no. We're probably less shaky. I had him at 26 earlier, which is what he played in the last one. I cut it down to 24. Could be still, again, a little bit shaky, but a little bit probably more stable at 24 than at 26. Could get those 26, of course, and then look even better. Just a 4.5 value on FanDuel, but we got him ahead of the field at 18%. Power forward and center eligible at 46, but at 37 on DraftKings, 5.55 value score, way above the field at 52%. Definitely an interesting piece coming out of that Clippers New Orleans game, and on the other side of it for a change. And then we get Kawhi, we get Zubac, both right below the value threshold of 5.5. The other guy that was at 5.5 is $3,200 Isaiah Stewart going up against that terrible team out of Washington. This is Stewart in a 19-minute projection. That's right around what he's been playing. He averages 19.8 for this season. He played 19.4 in their last game, put up 1.75-ish, 30.2 FanDuel points in 19.4 minutes. Not bad. 0.97 per minute overall. He's a low usage guy, but he's a collector of fantasy points as a big man. I would just like to have, I hate playing guys unless they're extreme per minute. TJ McConnell in 19 minutes is a different kind of option than Isaiah Stewart. Good as Stewart can be per minute. Just the more reliable per minute guys. I hate dipping into the sub 20 minute projection pool unless I really need to. At 3,200, the value's there, but you can see how it came out. Below 20%, below the field. But for every additional minute beyond this that he plays, his value takes big steps up because he's so cheap. So I do think he's a worthwhile building block around 1 in 5. But I probably wouldn't push it too much there because I don't know that we need it with all that value that's going through the guard spots. On FanDuel, you just don't have to worry about it because even though he's center and power forward eligible, 5% for 4,200 over there, just really not coming up. We got a lot of Giannis, which is good to see. Nice having stark distributions on our stars. So that 34% Giannis on FanDuel, keep in mind, goes with 70+% Harden, 60+% Kawhi, 70+% Zubac. So we're getting very specifically to those four, or the superstar and those three other very, very good players. On DraftKings, we did get 17% of $11,400 Giannis. Power forward and center eligible on DraftKings. We're below the field, but this is a below the field where it's take more if you want more. It's Giannis, and he's the best point per minute performer on the slate. If you can carry more Giannis, especially in a pace-up spot against Indiana, go for it. Take more. There's nothing wrong with that. Again, just to reinforce the point, monster shares and above the field on Kawhi. Monster shares and above the field on Zubac. They're just cheap, 36 and 34 minutes with a little bit of usage on the table with Norman Powell still out, 8,100, 7,900. Very, very functional on this slate. On DraftKings, it's slightly less value, but not ridiculously so. We're below the value threshold, but 5.38, 5.44, pretty close to 5.5. It's just we're like halfway, again, over the value threshold over there. 48% and 38%. Above the field and level with the field, Kawhi, Zubac. Lots of all three of the key Clippers. Dennis says, I think I might try a new strategy of playing collectors with fantasy points instead of the trash I've been playing. Yeah, look, the collectors get there too, as long as they collect enough fantasy points. It's just about the likelihood of distribution or the chasing those swings that you're kind of alluding to. Tobias Harris flatly in the middle of the board on FanDuel, 18%, level with the field, 6,400 both forward spots. He's significantly cheaper on DraftKings. 5,700 is not a bad price to find Tobias Harris, especially in a loose game going up against Washington. There's really nothing wrong with that spot. 36% were above the field, 5.25 value score. You could conceivably give him 2 more minutes, 3 more minutes, maybe even more. He played 36.9 in their last game, put up a 39.8. That's above his season-long per minute production, which has slipped by about 1/10 of a point per minute overall. It's come down on lower usage in Detroit, but definitely a very playable piece on the DraftKings slate at 57. That's like below a mid-level price for an above mid-level potential performer on a slate like this. 29% of Max Strus. He's one of those guys that can burn you so easily that with so much going through, we talked about him already among guards. I'm just realizing, but he's in that bucket of guys that we were getting with these the $4,100 price tags on. So just keep in mind, there are a lot of options to move around there. Strus is a 0.86, 0.82 player per minute. He's not a bad option, but the usage can get low. So if you get one of those games where the shots just aren't there, the attempts just aren't there quite as much, it can hurt you. Cam, we've talked about Lazar Thompson, only forward eligible on DraftKings, so we haven't talked about him. He's small forward shooting guard on FanDuel for 66. We only got him 5% of the time. That's level with the field on the FanDuel slate. On DraftKings at 55, both forward spots, I'm imagining it's the different positioning and the much better price that's forcing him into 26% of lineups over there and above the field. Pretty nice buy. Again, anybody coming out of Detroit with a reasonable expectation of more than 20 minutes is very playable against Washington here. So Thompson's benefiting from that. He's also just been good this season. 1.07 DraftKings, 113 FanDuel. Not bad. The minutes have bounced around a little bit. We're at 24. Oh, come on. Just scrolling on the other file here. Been last 5 games, 21, 18, 31, 30, and 23. Obviously, 2 of those were the big upticks were with Tobias out. So we'd like to get into upper 20s minutes more reliably. But given the quality of play, given that they were talking about giving him some additional minutes just a week or so ago, I can see chasing legitimately a range up to 28 minutes and keeping him on the lower side of it. So I think he only gets better looking from here, which is why I do think if you're looking to take a position on FanDuel on a short slate, the price isn't great at 6,600. You can see it in the value score there. That's why we're not getting much of them. It's also why the field's not getting much of them. But if you were to give him those additional 4 minutes, and again, it's a pushover matchup, reason to believe he might get them, that goes up very, very quickly to meet that salary. And then you're getting a pretty good player at low single digits public ownership where, let's say we want to double it, we only have to go to 10 or 12. And now we've got a little bit of a, that kind of trajectory against the field. Not a terrible option to keep in mind. Quality player, quality matchup, everything I just said. Zaire Williams we talked about, but again, coming up quite a bit, 4,400 on DraftKings, 4,700 on FanDuel at small forward only. We're getting a decent amount there too, 21% and above the field. That said, everybody out of Brooklyn is going to be basically that same read. I just don't love throwing guys at this Cleveland team, especially mediocre per minute guys. Jared Allen, on the other hand, 16% on FanDuel. The 33-point projection, center and power forward eligibility is key on FanDuel. I like that a lot. 116 per minute. Not bad for 7,000. 29 minutes if you were to play 31, 32. So much the better. I don't really see a need for them to, in this big of a game, or a game with that big of a spread, I don't really see them pushing additional minutes on these guys who they've kind of tempered minutes for already anyway. But maybe we get 2 or 3 if it's somewhat close. On DraftKings at just 61, we're getting 22%, level with the field. 5.35 is closing in on our 5.5 value score that we're looking for. We also have Nick Claxton right in that same territory. 5,400, a little bit cheaper. We got him in the exact same exposure. There's some back and forth here. I wouldn't zero one out in favor of the other, but if you want to take one down by half and put it into the other and build a plus and a minus position, definitely probably a better idea than just going in directly even with the field on both at 22%. Be plus on one guy, minus on the other, especially given that they're going head-to-head. Not that that directly means, again, it's not a binary one succeeds, one fails just because they're playing each other. Hopefully that's understood when I say these things. But there is some semblance of, one rebound, both guys go for it. They're not both getting it. So within the non-binary is made up of many small binary instances, which is kind of weird. Nicky Claxton on FanDuel, mostly irrelevant, center only over there, 4.61, 2% exposed. Mix and match piece at best. Center only, he's not all that appealing. Kuzma, speaking of not all that appealing, 31% on FanDuel. He's 4.84 value. He's another guy who I just think is creeping through for the raw projection for the per minute. 0.88 is not great, but there's enough there. He's getting a little bit more than that on the matchup against Indiana. There's a little bit there to like, and 61 is pushing him through shares at those forward spots just enough. If you knock him down slightly, you'd probably get significantly less and level him off to the field in a hurry. So it's probably not a big difference projection-wise between a lot of Kuzma and not that much Kuzma on this slate, just given the dynamics of why he's there. Like a minor adjustment between him and $6,200 Chris Middleton, $6,300 Alex Sarr could very, very quickly swing that. And that might be worth just kicking back and forth for shares against the public ownership anyway. Chris Middleton were below the field at 6%. Sarr were well above the field at 30%, but the public's there. So maybe grab a few Middleton shares just because he's going to be owned in the upper single digits probably. But not looking great in a 25-minute projection at 62 either. Just 10%-ish on both those players on the DraftKings slate. Giannis is the key. Big piece here, obviously. Stewart we've talked about. Kuzma we've talked about. Murph, Smart we talked about. Nick Batum. Like we needed another peach. I speak good. Like we needed another piece coming out of the Clippers, but there's Nick Batum. 27 minutes. One less than he played in their last game. He only put up 16.8 FanDuel points in that game. He's a .66 per minute performer this season on 8.4% usage. Well, maybe not. I was just going to say, I think that's the lowest usage rate among anybody who plays more than like 15 minutes a game or 12 minutes a game. We're just shy of that minute mark. More than 10 minutes a game. Jericho Sims gets a little bit less usage, but that is shockingly low as far as opportunities go. Production-wise, I'm actually kind of surprised he can get to .66 on that. I really don't love the raw number there at 32%. I'm fine with being above the field, but not if it needs to go that high. I think we've got enough value. Maybe not. How does he bounce off the Marcus Smarts of the world? Yeah, he's another 300 cheaper than Smart. That's why we're getting there. 32% of both of these guys. And this is actually only gently above the field, so the field's apparently going to be there. I don't love having to play this or that. And again, this is only in a 20-minute projection. Ugh. Not ideal. Between the two, I greatly prefer Marcus Smart, even with the fewer minutes, just given that he's a much better per-minute guy who actually has more than double the usage rate almost. Boy, that's sticky on FanDuel. Isaiah Stewart at 3,200, 5.5 value score is an easy building block on the DraftKings slate. Again, even in a 19-minute projection, that one's just working on price. You've got $3,300, 9.3% exposed Sam Merrill to work with there. If you give Sammy another couple of minutes and a little tickle for usage, you could get him a little bit higher than that as well. Level him off to the field's probably 12% or so. Doug says, I'll never have a single share of Kuzma unless Giannis and Lillard are out. Even then, I don't trust them. Yeah, the word trust and Kuzma do not belong in the same sentence. But numbers-wise, he is coming up. I mean, it's undeniable that the price is fair for the production. So it's one where I just put the big piece of duct tape over the name on the back of the jersey, and I don't worry about who it is, and I just follow the numbers. But I'm with you on the trust. Maganak says Batum isn't necessary. Doug says Batum's certainly interesting. Maganak says certainly not interesting. I bounce back and forth. I'm following the numbers on it. I don't think he's interesting in that in the just disgusting green puking emoji face of that. But the this of it, bouncing off the that of it, creating the this of it and the that of it makes him interesting. So another one, just block off who the player is. Same deal with Marcus Smart in his just 20 minutes here. It's just about it's about the purchasing power of the 3,800, the 4,100. Going back to the analogy we've made all through the season and years past with the suitcase problem, the knapsack problem. That's your travel size toothbrush. That's your collapsible beach chair that folds down that small. I don't know. I couldn't think of another. That's your tiny bottle of tanning lotion that protects you. Right? Those are the things that are just easy to throw into the suitcase, and they create room for you to be able to bring your big oversized flippers and your beach chair and your big beach umbrella. And that's your Giannis, your Kawhi, your James Harden, and so on. That's all it really does. Yeah, it's a different play across sites, as Doug's pointing out for Batum. Even at 37 power forward and center eligible, we did get him a little bit. But this 4.78, keep in mind, a lot closer to 5 than that 4.89 is to 5.5. So 6% on DraftKings, that's a very much take it or leave it, just moving piece for 37 on the DK slate. So very, very different plays. Joker's excited to come talk about Nick Batum. I don't know if he's here warning us not to play Nick Batum, or he's like, no, dummy, you need him. His value. He's all excited about something. Let's look just real quick before we wind things down. Let's look at centers on FanDuel, as we tend to try and do here. Oh, I've got this sorted all upside down. Hold on. So the center-only spot is going to mostly go to Zubac. 72% of Zoo. And then that gets it to 80, 80 and change, 90 and change. That is 98.68. So there are one or two shares out there in the world for center power forward guys to go into the center spot on FanDuel. But by and large, as you can see here, anybody with power forward and center eligibility, you pretty much want to play at the power forward. And we've got a lot of guys in that category that do come up. 30% of Sarr and above the field, 18% of Carlo and above the field, 16% on Jared Allen and level. We didn't talk about Mobley. We're at 14% and below the field on him on FanDuel. He's 85 on the FanDuel slate. That seems more playable despite the value hit. 8,300 on DraftKings. We really didn't get him that much. 5.3. I feel like he's probably just getting boxed out of shares. But he's good enough and a good enough per minute performer at 1.30 for this slate to qualify for, if you can get 10 more Evan Mobley shares comfortably and not be far off the beaten path here for optimals, then so be it. Take more. He's good enough in that spot. 8% of Duran. A little bit of Eve Misi, who we didn't talk about. He was coming up a lot the other day, played 28 minutes, just put up 23 fantasy points, kind of a disappointing performance. He's been a 0.92 per minute player. It was realistic to have expectations of him, but don't know that we need to chase it. 4,900, he's fine. 4.92 is close to the value mark and closer even than some of these guys that we're getting at power forward. But there are better center plays, and the biggest of the day has the best value score among them. So I think it's a don't overthink it, just play Zubac at center today on FanDuel by and large. Mr. Smith, absolutely. Any of these guys. Any of those guys right up at the top there. And they're all just kind of pay-uppy types, well, except for Dennis Schroeder. But I think 2 out of those 3 Clippers at the top should probably be in a cash lineup on FanDuel. Just because their public exposure is in the 40s for all 3 guys. And sim-wise, we're getting to more of them, which means they're just super optimal right now. As far as value guys go, Schroeder is kind of in that bucket. I don't fully trust him, but 4,800 is making a lot of things work there. 3,800 on Batum, like we've been discussing, that is probably a cash play. 41 on Smart probably also is, but you probably don't need both of those and that. So I'd say 2 of the Clippers and then 2 of like Schroeder, Batum, Smart, with probably a lean toward Schroeder as one of those 2. You can mix that up too a little bit more. We've got Champagne in here. I didn't talk about him, but we're getting him at 28% on FanDuel. With just 1 share of him on DraftKings for 47 at power forward, but he's more relevant on FanDuel at small forward for reasons. Again, that's just about how those positions, kind of mesh together and what you're going to get out of those lineups. And the lineups that do fill that spot with somebody at 42 and leave, let's say, 900 on the table instead of somebody at 47 and leave 200 on the table will underperform in the Sims. There will be an offset between whoever that imaginary hypothetical strawman is and Justin Champagne here. So that's why we get to those. Those are realistic that those guys will come up on such a short slate. But yeah, I think you got again, just with those Clippers coming up the way they are, at least right now, pretty straightforward. 2 out of those 3 guys should be in a cash lineup is the easy answer. You got it, Mr. Smith. Doug likes Makovich and Stewart. Stewart on DraftKings, not on FanDuel. All right, Stewart on FanDuel is 42, not really coming up that much. On DraftKings at 32, he's coming up more. That said, for me, not one of the critical value plays, but if you give him more, Doug, depends on where you got him projected, I would say. Do you have him over 20 minutes? If you got him like 22 or something like that, it works quite a bit better. Makovich, I agree with more. But again, I think that one, was that also? Yeah, Makovich is fine on FanDuel. I think the guys mentioned probably a little bit stronger. But again, if you give Makovich those extra 2 minutes, he'll look even better than this. And you get him a little bit more. You'd have him probably 25-ish% and a little bit darker green color above the field. On the DraftKings slate, I did definitely mention right here. Yeah, 3,700. He's a crucial value on DraftKings. 52% of our lineups. He's one of the 3 guys on the entire DraftKings slate that's above a 5.5 value score. The other ones being Jalen Duren at 5.72. And 5.5 for Isaiah Stewart, as you mentioned. So, yeah, DraftKings-wise, those are values. But going to FanDuel, a little bit different. That said, I think we've covered most of it, gang. Just check for any outliers here. So nothing at the bottom of the board among the scrubs. A lot of commonality as far as these go. The 28% of Alvarado, this isn't sorted by DraftKings, this is sorted by FanDuel, so we've got it on the opposite side today. Or right now, anyway. So the 28% there, the 26% there are site-to-site outliers, but fair amount of commonality between the sites. The Jalen Duren play is very different across sites at 77 versus 66. He could get there on FanDuel, especially if we get one of those days where he pops above 30 minutes. Those are his successful days. We're not, again, 494 is right knocking on the door of our value threshold. So below the field 8%, you could push that to 12, 15, level off with the field at the expense of a couple Zubac shares. But Zubac just looks a whole hell of a lot better. Really about it. 5:40. That's an hour on the nose. I wasn't even looking at the clock. Technically, I think I started at like 5:42. Cam Johnson, I don't think I said his name. 3%, 4%, pretty far below the field on both sites. 6,500, 6,100. I've got him only at 30 minutes. Kind of reserved with everybody on the Nets right now. You could easily push that to 32. I might in the update. I don't think it makes him look relevant to the slate, really. You'd probably end up at 5 here and maybe 6 or 7 there and still hard undercut to the field. Again, just nobody coming out of the Brooklyn side is super appealing outside of just the spot fillers that we were getting to. Bogdan, one of the few Clippers who's not really coming up. 2% FanDuel, 1 share on DraftKings. It's kind of appropriately priced for the bad season he's having. 0.75, very disappointing FanDuel season. 0.78, disappointing DraftKings season for him. It's not the wildest idea, Doug. I'm sorry that when I searched it, it came up with no shares here on DraftKings, but you're not wrong, and that's why I land here on the value score. Like, look how offset that 4.8 is for everybody else that came up with no shares. It's entirely reasonable to throw a dart, like you said, Adam. This is with him at a 16-minute projection. If they try and size up a little bit, I could see it. So, yeah. I don't have an issue with that, especially if he picks up a couple additional minutes, but there's also a big downside on those minutes. So it would just be driven by the price. 4.8 is a reasonable value score. He's very competitive value score-wise with some guys up here. How far off of the 489 that we're getting for $3,700 Nick Batum is that really? An 18-point projection versus a 16 and change point projection? So yeah, he's a functional value lever or potentially functional value lever. But numbers-wise, coming through the sim, it's not really the spot that I'm going to be calling out. But yeah, this is an outlier value down here in that range. If you reran this, you could easily end up with a few shares of him and at worst this kind of territory. So that's probably a little happenstance baked in there. If you knock a minute off of one other guy in the sim, you could end up with a lot more of them. So there's just a little bit of slate dynamics at play there. Like, given that Batum has power forward and center here, if you took him down by those same 2 points, that would probably make all the difference in getting these $3,400 Thomas Bryant shares. It wouldn't be a huge amount. It would be 1%, 5% at most, I would think. But it's not incorrect to say that he's potentially a value because he's very cheap. On a larger slate, that wouldn't be there. Not really seeing anybody else pop off the page. Obviously, watch what happens with Indy, given that Halliburton and McConnell are both questionable. You could see major uptick for the Nemhards and Neesmiths and so on of the world, given what happens there. But yeah, definitely some potential bounce in that one. Amir Coffey, another cheap Clippers option who's not really coming up. Just 24-minute projected. Very, very cheap. Cheap enough that if you gave him a few additional minutes, he played 27-4. He averages about 26. If you gave him a couple additional minutes there, you could easily see him bounce into a little bit more relevance in the upper single digits rather than the lower single digits as far as our exposure goes. Probably just gets him back to the field or thereabouts. Spida, not really coming up. 1.3% FanDuel, 3.3% DraftKings. You can absolutely take more. But again, like with all these top-end Cavs guys, I've only got him at 31 minutes. It's right on his season average. Last game, he only played 29-9. He put up exactly a point or shy of a point per minute. He's obviously fantastic, but they are conservative, and there is no need for them to run their key players into the ground to beat this Brooklyn team. That said, I would have said the same thing about beating a 6-man Dallas team last night, and apparently they won that game, so what the hell do I know? Technically, it was 8 men. I think, what was it? Who's he facing? What's his name? Powell and Caleb Martin, I think, ended up playing 20 apiece. So they did get into the game a little bit. Anyway, I think that's about it, gang. You do have, again, a couple like random ass outliers here. $3,400, if we're going to be mentioning $3,400 Thomas Bryant or $3,200 Thomas Bryant. Jericho Sims, Dean Wades of the world on a 4-gamer. You throw either of those guys a couple additional minutes and maybe something pops, but neither guy is looking at all relevant. All these guys down here are in zeros. It's just those 16 minutes stood out a little bit. Same with 18 minutes on Jalen Wilson, 20 minutes on Noah Clowney in a matchup that I hate, Tyrese Martin in 20 minutes. Anybody in the 16-plus range today, if their salary's in the 3,000s, could reasonably get on the board for a little bit of value contribution if minutes just swing in their favor somehow. So there are some lotto tickets in that range today, which is kind of like what Doug was getting at with the dart throw on Thomas Bryant, just to finalize that point. Yeah, Kispert we didn't talk about, huh? We got one share of him on both. I got him at 24 today. He played 22 in the last one. He averages about 26. There he is. 22, 27, 23, 21, 25. So you could have him bounce into the upper 20s. But right now, just being a little bit conservative with him at 24, and I think that's appropriate. Kind of between here and there. Really not showing us much for the 44 on FanDuel. That's a 3.7, tragically low value score. For anybody playing like relevant minutes, that's one of our lowest. And then on DraftKings, we're not any better at that 4.05. So yeah, he again could get through just on a guy who is a competent enough NBA player at times. A guy who has around league average usage on a slate where guys are relevant at 8% usage. Just on the idea that he might take a couple additional shots and actually make them, yeah, there could be a little bit of meat on the bone there for a Corey Kispert on a slate like this. But he's just very firmly in the bucket of lotto tickets down in this range. And I know, Doug, you brought him up because of helping other guys' potential. Malik Beasley, did we throw him into the mix? We're getting a lot of them on FanDuel. Another guy who reasonable opportunity to succeed against just a god-awful Washington team, and we know that Beasley will take his shots. 30% below the field on FanDuel. He's 53 shooting guard, small forward eligible. I like having the position, and honestly, at a 30% share, I'm perfectly fine being below the field and not pushing my luck. 5% on DraftKings for 54. A lot less relevant on the DK slate, 4.82. We're way off the mark value-wise, and we've just got so many quality spot fillers through both of those positions that he's just not coming up. But again, if we're looking for just random volume, 9.43s a game, making 41.7%. Potential volume for sure. It's got to be the most attempts per game. Yep. Who are those other guys taking more than 9? Beasley, Poole, and Dame. And Mitchell. It's like 2 of these things are not like the other 2. I would say there's a gap between those 2 guys. But that's all accounted for in Beasley's price offset. 5,400 versus 75, 9,085. In no universe am I saying that Malik Beasley is as good as even Jordan Poole, and certainly not Damian Lillard and Donovan Mitchell. But on threes, on volume, for price, there's definitely something to work with there on FanDuel at 53. That is not the case on DraftKings, though. You can play him on DK, and you should, if you're building out a full set of lineups. Even if you're building 5, he's perfectly playable. But we're only getting him at 5%. We're getting him 1 in 20. Nothing jumping out at me as I'm scrolling down here. Nothing we haven't talked about anyway. Pascal Siakam is at least worth throwing on the conversation pile here. We didn't get much of him in an is who he is kind of a situation. But if we do get the game with no Hallie and McConnell on top of that, definitely a little bit of rate uptick here available for Siakam. So he can get interesting in a hurry in that kind of a situation. Obviously, it's not a direct positional impact, but he might even pick up just a scrap minute and go from 33 to 34. But more importantly, I believe picks up a little bit of rate uptick there. So keep an eye on that. And then again, it's just the Matherins, Neesmiths, Nemhards of the world that'll pick up value there. McConnell, of course, will pick up some value if it's him in no Halliburton. But the minutes on McConnell, what did he end up playing yesterday? I think I projected him for 16 in the end yesterday. And he played 8.5. Wow. All right. So, we saw him play 19 seconds, 2 games back, sprain his ankle, come out of the game, and then he was active yesterday. But even the projection I gave him came up short, and that was a short projection. So I don't know, even if we get no Halliburton again, that he hits the board at all. Right now I've got him at 14. Maybe in that situation I push him 16, 18, and we'll see. But this is not encouraging. I think Alvarado, Doug. What do they roll with? They had, last time out it was Murph, Hawkins, Olynyk, Alvarado, and Misi. And then... Well, actually, no, that was CJ out. I've got 2 additional minutes swinging in Alvarado's favor. If I had to guess, I'd say him. And again, that was the way they had it the previous game, but that was with also no CJ. So we'll see how that comes out, but I would think it would be him. And then Hawkins, I've got at 24 minutes and playing a decent chunk, and I assume he's getting a few shares in here. Yeah, 2% on FanDuel, but no percent on DraftKings. What are we sorted by? I don't remember what I have the board cut by right now. Obviously, that wasn't a key play. We do have a little bit of them. But yeah, right now I'm leaning slightly Alvarado, but you can swing that at a moment's notice. Just push a couple minutes one way or the other. And then Makovic, as we talked about, obviously just looking fairly opportunistic. You got it, bud. You too, Cooch. Appreciate you guys. 5:53. Let me punch out of here. Let me get an update in. You guys all rock. Hit the like button if you haven't already. Hit the subscribe button if you're new, if you've not done it in the past. Every subscription does help. Check out rotoscouts.com. Everything's under $1 a day. NBA projections, NHL projections, MLB projections coming very soon. Season's right around the corner. Right now, though, if you're into MLB season long for Roto Leagues, or honestly head-to-head leagues, works just the same. Top 600 player rankings on the website right now in the same under $1 a day package. You have access to it if you're a subscriber. Season, off-season recap, roster previews, notes. I wrote a paragraph of notes on every single team with thoughts about players and availability interspersed between. It's all up on the website right now, all included, along with the projections for daily for under $1 a day. Check it out. Weekly, monthly, and quarterly plans available. Also, check out our guys over at acemind.io for all your sim and optimization needs. Promo code RotoScouts, all in caps. 20% off your first month. You guys absolutely rule. Good luck out there tonight. Somebody go win something. Share it when you do. And come on back for more tomorrow. See you, gang.